So, I'm nervous. Welcome to Elected, a podcast for women in and around politics. I'm your host, Sarah Elder Chaminar. It always feels weird saying that. Today, my guest is Jodi Calahoo Stonehouse. Hi, Jodi.
Hello, Sarah.
Hi.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming. And this episode is once again being recorded in a room full of people in the series of conversations with all of the candidates running to be the next leader of the Alberta NDP. And I am talking to everyone as if you're running to be premier in 2027.
Because we are.
Exactly. So I'm just talking to it's as if each of you is the winner in some ways. Welcome. We're on Treaty 7 land today. And that means a lot to me, not just because it's where I've chosen to make my home, but it's my chosen place of where I'm raising my family, my children. And I would say that one of the most important things of reconciliation and acknowledging the land that we're on today is that I get to see them become active participants in reconciliation, and seeing them think of land acknowledgements and understanding who the original stewards of the land was is so beautiful in some ways, because it's just natural to them and it wasn't natural for me. And so I can see a part of what I think and I hope to be reconciliation in action through them.
Beautiful. So, yeah, it's great to be here in Treaty 7 territory. One of the things around land acknowledgements, I'll tell you, it's decontextualized. And what that is really legitimately in our longhouses, our big houses, and our ceremonial spaces, when we introduce ourselves, we say, Tansatoya Kapapamaskam Nigaway, Connie Calahoo, Notawe, David Majo, and you go on and you talk about your lineage and where you belong. And what that does is that shares with the audience who you are, your family, and your responsibilities and obligations. And so the audience then will know if you come from a family of horse thieves, or if you're responsible for children, if you're part of Bear Clan, or if you're responsible for water. So that's why introducing ourselves and our family lineage and our responsibilities is really important, because then it holds us accountable to who we are, where we belong, and what we should be doing.
Well, and that's actually the first time I've ever incorporated my children into acknowledging the traditional territories. So that's really important. That's validating for me to think about it, because I definitely wasn't the recipient of the education I wish I had been on that front. But so let's get into why you're here today. Tell me, why do you want to be the leader of Alberta's NDP party, and why should people vote for you?
Thank you, Sarah. Well, interestingly enough, it wasn't that something I jumped to and thought, oh, I really need to do this. This looks like fun. It wasn't this moment of an epiphany of, this is what I should be doing with my life. It was, in fact, it was elders in my community and elders across the province and students who I've taught, who phoned me, showed up. Protocol was brought to me, which is tobacco. And many, many people said, we really need you to run. Your voice matters. Our voice matters. Please go, please go. And my parents, because I had to know, I'm not going to do this. I'm just going to be an MLA. As a First Nations person, I've had to, do multiple jobs because our communities are so underfunded and under-resourced.
And underrepresented.
So that I was doing a master's and had 2 full-time jobs, and my kids and foster kids. I've always had a tremendous amount going on. And so I thought, I'm just going to be an MLA. I'm just going to do one thing and put my feet up. And no, that's not the case. And so my parents said, you should really rethink this. So I brought protocol to Chief Wilton Littlechild, and we went into ceremony, and the elder said, you need to go here. And so here I am.
And how has it been so far?
I call it a campaign of love and miracles, because really that's what has brought me here, is the love of the people and my love for people, the support, my love for the province, and then the miracles. Every obstacle that I've been able to overcome has been, a miracle that people have made possible. When I was getting close to not making the first 20,000, and we did a call out so I could stay in the race. And I saw the, e-transfers of $10, $10, $3, $10. It made me weep because I thought, these are very poor people, and their commitment to me was really it makes me emotional still.
Yeah.
It was really overwhelming and thoughtful. And I'm just so blessed to be supported through donations, through love, lots of messages from elders. Keep going, my girl. Keep going, my girl. So I'm really, it's a campaign of love and miracles.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I think it's so important that you're in the race and that your focuses are water and climate. Those are so important.
Fundamental.
They're fundamental. And,
Yeah.
even thinking about it, like people, I mean, we take it for granted, right? When we like breathe in and breathe out, literally breathing is something that we just do automatically without thinking about it, right?
Yep. Yeah.
But specifically during COVID, breathing in and breathing out was really different.
Fires. Yeah.
Yeah.
Smoke.
And fire, right? Your airborne illnesses that are invisible to us.
Yeah.
Chemicals, pesticides, all of these things that we put into our environment that are relatively unseen, but can do significant and like deadly harm.
Yeah.
And so you've made these priorities.
Yes.
Do you is it frustrating in some ways that you have to make these priorities when we should just think that this is the right thing to do?
Well, it's astonishing to me that when we look at Alberta's assets, that on the budget sheet, we've actually missed all of our natural resources. And when I think about natural resources, I'm thinking about water, our forests. Those are the things that sustain our lives. And, we're taught when we're young that water is life. Like that's part of our teachings as Indigenous people. Water is life, and the ecosystem and the biodiversity. And then we think about our economic ecosystem in our province, and every single source of our industrial economic system needs water to thrive, whether it's producing hydrogen, oil and gas, whatever the work we're doing, forestry, agriculture, irrigation, we need water.
Food production.
All of it.
Yeah.
And we're headed into the worst drought that we've ever experienced. And we have no strategy to manage our water.
Well, and the UCP's strategy, from what I've seen, seems to be a small millions, right? Or even tens of millions of dollars for investing in small projects. But that does nothing to actually, manage our water in the present day, right? It's great that you can invest in a project that will, do something, in the longer term. But in the short term, there doesn't seem to be any desire to actually be like, you need to reduce, this is how much you need to reduce your personal consumption by, but also not just personal consumption, because putting this entirely on individuals is wrong. It's corporations and big businesses who draw on super huge quantities of a very precious resource for usually little to no money. What are they doing? And we don't hear from the UCP what they're doing to manage that.
Well, they're hoping people will play nice. And as it stands, there are 9 major producers that consume most of the water in Southern Alberta. It's related to irrigation and agriculture for food. And so we have to start looking at what is going to be of high value for Albertans. And not only are we thinking about irrigation and water systems and all of the economic systems over the next year, 2 years, 3 years, but then how are we going to mitigate the floods?
Right.
Because we know all of the science and data has told us, and we've had that. So this is not something that should shock us or surprise us. So why are we not investing in infrastructure that is going to protect Albertans? And that's fundamentally why I released the policy around water, because water is about sustaining our economic, our foundation of the economics of the entire province, and then our livelihoods. So really, water is life.
Yeah. And And I mean, are you hearing, I think probably from the individuals that you're talking to, but like larger stakeholders, are they giving you any pushback on this? Or is anyone asking, like, just leave this alone, just let us do what we want?
No, not yet. However, so many folks are coming forward saying, thank you for raising the issue of water. Thank you. Because we have so many fundamental flaws with how we're managing our water. If we look at downstream from the Alberta oil and gas, what we've done is we have polycyclical aryl hydrocarbons floating in the air with particulates that have arsenic, methylmercury, cadmium landing in the waterways. And then we've got the tailings ponds leaking, which also have methylmercury and zinc and cadmium and high levels and all kinds of selenium and minerals. And so the largest freshwater delta in North America is being contaminated. So when we think about water as a resource, we are not protecting it, taking care of it, and strategizing for future generations. And it's really, when we think about governing and leadership, it's not about today. It's about how do we make sure that the quality of life that everyone here lives is thriving and wonderful and has everything they need. But we've also created a pathway for our grandchildren.
Well, and I mean, I think about clean drinking water as something as fundamental to life. And, if there was ever, say, a boil water advisory, as we do, right, have them everywhere. But for example, if there was something to contaminate the entire water system in Calgary or Edmonton or any large Canadian, let's say Montreal, Quebec City, right, the action would be immediate. We don't see that same action when it's smaller communities outside of big centers. The money doesn't get invested. It seems to be acceptable in modern day society for people to live under boil water advisories on reserves for decades.
Yeah.
And
I applaud Rachel Notley when they were in government. She transformed 6 First Nations and removed boil water advisories. And there's always this jurisdictional warfare. Oh, that's the federal jurisdiction, not provincial. And Rachel just did it. Yeah. She just did it.
Oh, I've never heard that before, to be honest.
They removed 5 boil water advisories, or 6, sorry. And one of them was Enoch Cree Nation, which had a 25-year, which is right beside the city of Edmonton, 25-year boil water advisory.
And if it was in the city of Edmonton, it would be different, right? It would never.
That's right.
Yeah. Oh, the problems.
But there's solutions.
Yes. And you are one of them. So what are some of your other policies that are top of mind and, things that you really feel will that are needed in Alberta?
Thanks, Sarah, for that. So for me, fundamentally, what's really important is our economic sustainability. Stabilizing our economy is paramount to how we fix our broken systems. And we lost millions and millions of dollars investments with the renewable moratorium, which means we have to reestablish, reinvigorate our economy, diversify our economic
You mean
system.
Assuming you become leader and the NDP win in the next election,
which
right? Because the status quo, this mindset, this fight that Alberta has with Danielle Smith and the UCP will continue if they are reelected in 2027, right? Like that's a decision. So that would change under you.
Absolutely. We are leaders in energy. So let's diversify how we produce energy and sell that energy. Because as we know, our healthcare system, which takes up about 60% of our total budget in the province, is being held together with duct tape. British Columbia hired 200 doctors last year. That's 2 a week. Those are our doctors that they're hiring because they're paying them. So by stabilizing our investment, stabilizing our economic system, diversifying, moving into geothermal drilling, we're already experts in drilling. It's a logical step. Let's do that. Let's generate some power. Norway gets 72% of their total power through geothermal. In fact, Norway, Alaska came to study what Alberta was doing, and they took back what they learned and invested their money in themselves. What has Alberta done with their royalties? Since Lougheed, we've gone from 27 cents a barrel to Albertans. Now we're at just under 20 cents, which means where is these millions and $5 billion surplus we had in the last budget? What have you done? what have you done? And so it's about how then do we take the royalties? We need to renegotiate. This is our resource. This is our oil and gas as Albertans. And then we figure out how we fix the systems. We cannot fix the systems without stable investment and building our economic sustainability.
Well, something that really pisses me off on a daily basis, and it's not new, but it's becoming like heightened, is the dynamic that, that the UCP and the Smith government, like they're telling us, right? Like the power, they have all of the power in this relationship. And that really bothers me because as the voters, in my mind, the power actually resides with us, with Albertans, yes. Right? It's not in a cabinet.
Power to the people.
It's not, and it's not in any one individual, but that power is being centralized, in the top ranks of government more than ever before, I think. And it's also being, channeled out to chosen industries, right? And chosen leaders within industries.
Yeah.
And that really fucking pisses me off because, right? And that's only going to get worse over the next 3 years.
You can see it. This notion of, we're not going to have wind turbines because they're unpleasant to the viewer. Well, I'm sorry, but pump jacks are equally. But you know what? We figured out to get combines around the pump jack. And I'm pretty sure our farmers and ranchers are intelligent enough to get their combines and tractors around wind turbines.
Well, and also, have you ever, how much grass grows around a pump jack, right? Like the land, you can see the area around, like it's just not, it doesn't grow anything, right? But they're considering, and there's been research done, for example, on what can grow, what kind of vegetation, what kind of food can actually be grown under solar panels, right? It's just, it drives me absolutely insane.
Well, and there are models in the world where it's working.
Yeah.
If we look at what, Switzerland's doing, hydroelectricity, right? Like they've diversified how they're generating electricity. In Germany, they're on wind and solar and they're growing food. Like they have figured out, Norway has the largest organic non-GMO seed bank in the world. So the rest of the world is figuring out this next phase of, we want to make sure we still have cell phones and cars. So how do we produce energy with a zero carbon emission?
Yeah. And in Alberta, we're trying to just figure out how,
status quo,
everything else is bad. Renewables bad. Oil and gas, good. It's not that oil and gas is bad per se, right? It's just about diversifying that energy.
Yes.
Like
building.
Yes, I know. This doesn't seem so crazy when we say it out loud.
Well, it depends which investors support you.
Right. But even, anyway,
one of the things I applaud oil and gas for doing is historically, it used to take 5 barrels of water to process a barrel of crude. And there was a lot of pressure on them from the northern communities, like you're contaminating the water, you're using the water. And then they came up with the SAGD process, which was using steam to separate the bitumen from the sand.
Yes.
And they've reduced it from 5 to 1 barrel of water to 1 barrel of crude. So industry will adapt and modify. So now we need to say,
if you put the pressure on and say,
reduce carbon emissions.
Exactly.
They will do it.
Yeah.
That, if we look at where Syncrude and Suncor were going insofar as greening their economy, they were miles ahead of the government. And then we've seen in the past 2-3 years that they've actually regressed.
Yeah. Well, and I think
record profits.
Well, and I think that will actually only happen more because of Bill 18, the UCP's new legislation, which would essentially say, the federal government can't run money to universities directly. They need to be the gatekeeper as the province.
But we'll see. How many grants are there in Alberta?
But we'll see less investment, less.
We're already losing investment.
Not just less investment, but I'm talking about human capital too, because, a researcher who maybe was considering, actually, I can tell you, I met someone a couple of months ago, originally from Germany, who is a university professor in the States and was in town visiting a university and was contemplating taking a job here in something related to in the environment. Would we attract that individual? if we can't have the money that maybe is attached to their field of study because the province doesn't agree ideologically with that field of study.
Well, we've already lost innovators. Germany scooped them up. Yeah. We're losing a tremendous amount of resource.
Yeah.
Already.
Right. So we're not just driving away investment, we're driving away people that are tied to that investment.
Yeah. And global investors. Ashoka is one of the leading institutions working on climate change and climate responses globally. Yeah. They pulled their funding out of Alberta because we're so far back.
Well, and that's the thing. It can't be said, the idea that, and it was asked during the last podcast with Nenshi, someone said, like, I was a door knocker at, and what I would hear is, I really like Rachel Notley, I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah.
But, the economy is first and foremost in my mind. Right. The NDP also has a strong economic message. Yeah. It's just that the appetite for receiving it, it's like there's a wall. Right.
Wow. The economic.
Do you see that too?
I think it was rhetoric created to, to cause harm towards the NDP. Right. What it does is it creates this tension and this hate. Really, it's really negative towards NDP from oil and gas. When really, a lot of us grew up in oil and gas. My dad's worked on the patch since I was 6 years old.
My husband works in oil and gas.
Right. So this is the reality. Yeah. The foundation of our province was built on oil and gas. This is who we are. Well, we just need to do it better. Well, record profits, record contamination. Let's do something about it.
Well, yeah. And I mean, so when I first moved to Alberta, I moved to Fort McMurray from Victoria. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I went to law school at UVic, so I imagine that's a bit of a shock.
I did visit once before. And I can remember flying in the first time and being like, wow, I wasn't expecting, honestly, I was expecting something devastating. Like I was expecting a really horrible scene. Yeah. But what we flew in over was forest, right?
It's beautiful. It is beautiful.
Stunning. Yeah. Best sunrises and sunsets I've ever seen in my life. Yeah. In Canada were there. But also, it's, and coming from Victoria and growing up in BC, where I would say, generally speaking, more of an environmentally conscious kind of outlook. And then I applied to that, the bias of thinking I would fly into, this otherworldly Mordor-like scene. That's not, it does look like a mine in certain places, but certainly not everywhere. And my husband brought home, because I was really struggled to understand, what is this? What is oil sands? And so he brought home one day, just wrapped in a napkin, this very sand, just sand, not even a ton, literally a palm size amount. And he showed me. What he did was he put it in a clear glass, filled it with hot water, and then let it sit. And then I saw it separate myself. Yeah. It was insane. I've never seen anything like that before. And that was just dirt, right? What I would think of as dirt.
Yes.
But that's a very precious resource.
We really haven't done ourselves any favors in the way we also take care of our employees up there. Alberta has the highest rate of divorce out of man camps, right? So we weren't taking care of our employees, the quality of health, the quality of wellness. If we look at rates of cancer, which we're not talking about. The other thing is we have not had an increase in pay for those members and or more jobs. And so with record profits, we're becoming irresponsible and sloppy, and that's not acceptable.
Yeah. Completely agree. Yeah. If, in any sector, if there's record profits, I can understand from a pure shareholder board kind of perspective, you want to create as much value for your shareholders as possible. But I think the view also has to be that your first set of shareholders and the most important part of stakeholders is your workforce.
$46 million for your pay as the CEO. That's not okay.
Yeah.
That's not okay when we have 5 Albertans dying a day.
Well, and how much are they taxed, right? How much?
46 million.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure they can afford to pay their tax, but it's not enough.
Exactly. Right. Because when you're making that much money, you can find ways to keep
no one's job. No one's job.
Yeah.
In my mind is worth $46 million a year.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the misalignment, right? And I'm not anti-wealth and I'm not anti-corporation, but like, let's be thoughtful about this, right?
When 5 Albertans are dying a day, according to the medical examiner, and it's because of quality of life, something's not right. And we need to fix that. And that's part of the strategy, diversifying our economy, building economic wealth so that it's shared amongst all Albertans so that we can fix our healthcare. And that we have the lowest investment in the country per student in our schools. That's shameful. We should have institutions of excellence. People from around the world should be begging to come and study in Alberta, Canada. And in fact, that's not what's happening. So fixing our educational institutions, fixing our healthcare means we have got to fix our economic systems.
Yeah. And I think it's a matter of where the money goes, right? And how much money goes where. So I don't know why this is difficult, but it seems to be really hard. How have you found the campaign so far? Like, what's something that has surprised you and what's something maybe that actually has disappointed you that is going unseen and people need to know about?
I'm just so thankful for the conversations, the really thoughtful questions. Albertans care. That's really what's profoundly hit me is the level of care that people have for, virtually, we don't all know one another. We don't know each other. And so I get to be sort of this person who witnesses all of these folks from different walks of life, different religious beliefs, different cultures, and they all fundamentally care about where we live and who lives here and how we live. And that's such a gift. Like, I'm just humbled and honored to see and witness people. And I also, when people come to me with their stories of struggle, I hear them and I take those to heart. And that's what fuels me to continue going. When people share their hard times, we can work together to build a better place for all. And so for me, just the stories have been really moving and incredible. What's been disappointing? Well, I'd sure like a driver. I'm tired. Yeah. I'm exhausted, but it's the time of my life. I'm so thankful.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you're running against, well, it was 5. It's now 4.
Yes.
Right. With Raki Pancholi dropping out of the race too and endorsing Nenshi.
Yeah.
When people are thinking about who they're voting for, you want them to put you at the top of the ballot. Who do you see is someone who is like-minded that you could potentially, how do you see, if you were filling out your own ballot, what would that look like?
If I was filling out my own ballot, I've been thinking about this, like who do I get behind? Who would I support? And I haven't yet decided because I haven't heard what resonates with me on foundationally. Who is going to beat Danielle Smith?
Besides you, of course.
Right. Like this is you have to beat her.
Yes.
And then you have to have a plan because we're in crisis.
Yeah.
Who can manage crisis? Because this is not a typical 1982 Alberta where we're headed to a Stanley Cup and we have Wayne Gretzky and life is great.
Yeah.
We're going to be in a major deficit. We're going to have highest unemployment rate, the highest rate of deaths. We're going to have forest fires, a drought. Who can handle a crisis and manage it and beat Danielle Smith? And I think it's only me.
I like that answer. And I like your confidence. That was actually, so when I met Sarah Hoffman for the first time, when she came to the store to do her podcast, and she was like, I'm a winner. And actually, then she had something nice to say. He said, have you met with everyone else yet? And I said, and I was like, I think so. And then I was like, no, I haven't. Jodi's coming next weekend. And he said that I would love you because you're also strong and have that same kind of magic and confidence, that same kind of confidence that I wish we could spread to more women in politics, to be frank.
Well, that's why we're here, because we're putting our elbows out and
Yeah.
making space when we walk so that the next generation can follow us.
Yeah.
It's really important that we see gender equity and also gender equitable pay. Alberta is the lowest in the country. Let's do better. Let's do better. And it's possible. It's possible. All of the good things are possible, but it is going to take determination, strategy, and really hard work, rolling up the sleeves and getting down to work.
So before we wrap up and go to the Q&A portion, you said, there's like literally fire on our doorstep, but you also have to beat Danielle Smith.
Yes.
What's your strategy to do that?
Well, it's simple. We just get the rural to vote for us.
Okay.
And so building that relationship means repairing the harm. When we put through Bill 6 the last time when we were in government, that hurt
the farm workers.
Yes, that devastated the relationship. And so owning that, which Rachel did and the team did, and now repairing the relationship. And so folks need to see themselves reflected, whether they work in oil and gas or in hydrogen or Dow Chemicals, or they work as a farmer or rancher or in the grocery store.
Yeah.
They have to see themselves reflected in New Democrats. And that's what I'm doing. That's what we're doing.
Do you see part of maybe a better way to rural success is with candidate recruitment? In having that level of representation too, being like a New Democrat who is also in the farming and agriculture community.
Absolutely. And we're starting to build that base. I'm so excited to see Karen Shaw, Bill Tanita, Kyle Kozowski. Like, we're really growing and bringing on some exceptional folks. Karen is this incredible farmer who's, birthing calves and talking about policy.
I love it.
Right?
Yeah.
This is Alberta. This is who we are. This is the women who are running the show in their homes and in their communities.
Yeah.
And we need folks who have real life experience governing, because far too often we're getting folks who've had very privileged, wonderful lives, go to post-secondary institutions, and then become the governing voice.
There hasn't been any struggle. Not that I want people to struggle, but you
have a job at least.
Yeah. And, there's just, we don't need more bills who are accountants, like, respectfully, right? We need something, they can still be at the table, but the table needs to be different.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So let's move on to the audience portion, and hopefully this picks up the questions as well. So who has a question for Jodi? If not, I will fill in the gap because I always have more questions. Yes.
I think back to Danielle Smith, it's not just her. It's the circle that she surrounds herself. So for yourself, it's, how confident are you in, addressing that polarization that they keep pushing?
So, folks often say to me, how are we going to change people's minds? How are we going to change people's minds? I don't believe that we can. I think what's really important is finding folks who align with our value systems and having them vote. And then we just do the work. We make the policy and we just transform Alberta for the next generations, because sometimes you cannot change people's minds. And over time, as people see their quality of life getting better, their hospitals don't have a 12-hour lineup with duct tape holding the things together, they see the classrooms are functioning better, then of course they'll gradually, this is working. But what's most important, we were only 1,300 votes short of winning government. So it's really about winning government and doing the work. And over time, people will learn to trust and be a part of
the voices of those who are you.
Absolutely. We've got to build those relationships.
Yeah.
Good question. Thank you.
Question?
So you started talking about how there are disparate people that represent the communities that they come from. You have this badass who is birthing cows and a part of it. You're a representative of where you come from as well. Do you find that the government is amenable to opening up positions that are more in alignment with the communities if there is going to be a board that talks about tribal community, right? That instead of having it be some vote generalized where individuals are from all over, do you think that the government is ever going to be amenable to opening up positions where individuals organically grow from the communities that they come from?
Well, when we are government, which will be in 2027, one of the things I look forward to is lifting our caucus's voice. We already have these beautiful organic communities. We have the rural caucus, the Indigenous caucus, the queer caucus, the disability caucus, right? We have all of these folks who are on the ground, experts in their communities, who are connected to others. And that's how we govern together. It's a collective movement. And it's about including those voices. Rachel Notley had the privilege of being a governor for so many decades, and her father, that they built this reputation and that institutional memory. Well, none of us have that luxury walking in there with that like she did. And so that's why it's really, really important that we strengthen the brand of the New Democrat Party, that it is the NDP party, so that when I'm gone, the next person steps right in and we're just as strong as we ever were, because we are collective. We are reflective of all of these communities. We have those stakeholders. We're strong, and it's not just a person, it's all of us.
I'll throw in a question. So something that we've heard from policy from other candidates is rethinking that the possible rethinking of the relationship with the federal NDP. Where are you on that?
So I asked myself a couple of questions. One, who generated this question for us? Was it us, by us? And I doubt that. Second, what is the motivation? Where will it lead us? What is the outcome, the desired outcome? And most importantly, this is about membership making this decision. So that means sitting with caucuses, sitting with the memberships, presenting it back and listening to your members, and then making the decision based on what you hear.
Members being not just caucus, but the membership.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. Is there something else, a policy from another candidate that you've thought like, wow, I wish I'd thought of that?
No.
Okay. Yes.
So the past two UCP governments didn't find the need for administrative. They left the workers hanging, they rolled back the OHS. Do you have a plan for that?
Yes. And I think that's so important. We have neglected our workers, and we see it in the decrease in wages. And when you don't have a minister of labor, you're not making decisions advocating for the folks who are working in labor. So first and foremost, we have to reinstate that position. And then we have to look at all of the things that have come, double breasting. We have to deal with that. We have to, there's been so much neglect that has been compounded that it's impacting Albertans who are working in the labor industry. So starting with the minister, and then we have to rework the policy. Yes, absolutely. Great question. Alberta is made of workers. This is what we are. We have to take care of our people. We have to take care of our workers.
Well, the economy is nothing without people, right? Like literally.
Mm-hmm.
In the same way I think about, collective action. And I mean, all of these things at one point I'm coming out of my mouth, I would never think. But anyways, here I am living in Alberta, and I actually have joined the party.
Yay.
Thinking about, specifically on women's issues, like, and we've seen it in other parts of the world, like women striking. Like there is such enormous power in our collectivism. And we don't use it to our advantage in the way that we could, right? Like on equal pay, even in my own home, like my husband does a lot. But there are things that have been Easter baskets and some an astronaut costume and a Paw Patrol costume sitting at the top of our stairs. And he goes to the basement regularly. It's just sitting there, right? And it will go downstairs to where it belongs when I go downstairs and I do that. But like, how long will it sit there, right? So in order, if I was to, and everyone else in this room who was so inclined, if we were just, and you've seen it happen, people have made videos about it. If we all just stopped our work, our unpaid labor, or whatever it is, how long would it take before
society will collapse?
Exactly. It would. Without the unpaid labor of women, society would collapse and would cease to exist, actually. But we're not harnessing that power.
We're going to start to. I saw we had a question over
Yeah.
there.
This still felt like a nice pair up from the question earlier. Alberta has the second lowest minimum wage in the country. You observed earlier that per capita funding for students is the lowest in education across the country. What is the provincial government's place, and what is your provincial government's place in addressing this?
The minimum wage.
Oh yeah.
Well, that has to be increased, right?
Yeah.
And so one of the things I learned in studying that we also have to do is that it really hurts small businesses the last time the New Democrats did that. When I was going around working with small businesses, listening to them, because they have to end up paying their staff more.
Yeah.
And some are just making it as it is. And so, yes, we want to do that. And yes, we have to figure out ways that we are supporting our entrepreneurs and our small businesses, because everything is connected. When we work with one system, it is going to have ample impacts on others, which is why we have to make sure we are talking to all the parts of the system and investing and raising the bar for all the pieces so that one doesn't get more harm caused because we thought, oh, this is a great idea. And then we deplete, 30 other economies. So it's really about making sure we're investing not just in one, but in all.
Yeah. Well, and I would, with my small business hat on, small businesses, I could go on and on and on about how challenging the economy is right now for small businesses. And, it's really frustrating to see, people talk a really good game around small businesses being the backbone of any community, right? And the economic generators that they actually are. But we see bailouts for airlines, for media companies, for oil and gas, for oil and gas companies that don't clean up the jobs that they are legally obligated to do. And it's not that, I want small businesses to get a bailout. It's just that I want, where governments seem to think the value is.
That's right.
Is out of alignment, I would say, with actually where community values are.
Well, and we saw in Alberta when we made the move to corporatizing farms, right? We went from small family farms and really hurt those people where they weren't able to sustain their farms anymore.
Yeah.
We've got big corporate industrial farms in Alberta who, have the monopoly on farming.
Yeah.
And now we're setting the same for small businesses.
Yeah,
So
it's going to be Amazon.
Yes.
It's not, it's not a dairy farm that has, 4,000 head of cattle. It's Amazon, right? That's
why we have to protect local.
Yeah.
It's paramount to our economies and to our families.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
To your point about protecting local, you brought up water sources, right? We have water, and on the other hand, we have oil. Hydrofracking is an issue in general, and I'm hoping that we are doing our part to prevent that. But when it comes to water sources, do we own the water sources?
So,
or is that something that's
right
going to
now,
be given to somebody else as well? Because there are cases around the world where
right,
Coca-Cola is buying water sources.
My policy was the first to give water rights. Water doesn't have rights currently, but there are other places in the world where water has rights, and then it has to be respected and treated as such. And so currently the first in time, first in right process is about water allocation, and it is not going to sustain or work in a drought. And in that negotiation, First Nations and Métis communities were negated out of it. So they don't have a legal right. Currently in Alberta, 11% of the allocation is to citizens. The rest is corporate entities. 61% of that is agriculture.
That makes sense. It's commoditized.
Yeah. So, if anyone is interested, unless there's any other questions. Oh, yep.
So I work with in addictions and mental health. Some relatively big questions. What do you do to sort of address the use and abuse change with recovery model?
Yeah.
And I also have been thinking, I work also with a lot of diverse folks. So that whole shit show is very damaging as well. So just wondering what your thoughts are.
That's a great question. It's been devastating to see the impacts of their strategy. And I hate to even call it a strategy. Their decision making has been painstaking, and it is actually causing harm to Albertans. And so currently, the medical examiner talked about 5 people a day dying, if not more, from the opioid addiction. And so how do we deal with addiction? Well, if we look at models around the world, which means, it's nice that they want to be, do their own model and have publications, and now they're building a research institute, but we're human beings, and human beings struggling with addiction. It's not time to be testing your theory that you just created on your own. It's about looking at what experts have done over time around the world. And so if we look at what Dr. Bruce Perry has done, Dr. Gabor Mate, there are experts who have said it's about looking at trauma on the brain. And then we have to create wraparound services and meet people where they're at. So we have multiple generations with fetal alcohol who are using opioids, who have permanent brain injury from trauma, the opioids, and the FAS. That means we need to create housing with wraparound services. That's it. Simple fix. What we're headed to is creating more compound systemic drain on taxpayers, which is we are institutionalizing children. We have more children in foster care than we ever have before. And if you talk to any houseless person or addict on the street, I guarantee you, they will tell you they're either an Indian residential school survivor, a 60 scoop survivor, a millennial scoop survivor, and or a child of child and family services, child welfare. So now that we've had more kids than ever before, we're creating this systemic problem. They're institutionalized, then they end up in the incarceration. After incarceration, they get released and they're using to numb their trauma. We have to get to prevention and figure out, we have to stop apprehending children from their parents. It doesn't work. It's never worked. Not once in my life have I ever met a foster kid who said, wow, foster care really changed my life for the better. Never, ever, ever. It has never worked. We have to fix the problem, which if it's domestic violence, work with mom and dad and fix domestic violence. If it's addictions, work with moms and dads to fix the addiction. If it's gambling, work with mom and dads to fix the gambling. Work with mom and dads, because in Alberta, we have over 30,000 kids who are in and out of foster care. That's 60,000 parents who are not raising their kids. And then it becomes the systemic economic deficit. Last winter, 800 amputations. What does that cost us when we're paying for 800 amputations? Fingers, toes, legs, it's insanity. So we have to transform the system. When we think about addictions, prevention. We have got to work with the children, then the parents, and we transform it so that people's quality of life is thriving, that they feel like they're contributing to society. They have purpose, they have meaning, they're valued. It's really simple. And what we're doing is we're creating jobs for people that cause harm. So our role as government now is to figure out, how do we transform that economic system? The social workers, the guards, the people who work at the prisons, the police calls for service that police get have quadrupled since COVID, domestic violence. How do we transform that economic system so that people still have jobs and purpose and make pay, while we're transforming these people's lives to live a quality of life so that they have support? And so it's not just a thing. Again, it's multiple things that are connected that we have to move together.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
So I'm a part of multiple minorities, so I've got multiple strikes against me, which means that obtaining a job and maintaining a job is quite the challenge. So I was wondering if there is room in your government to either work with businesses to educate perhaps people who own businesses and run businesses to reduce discrimination, which is essentially legal. Or if there's room in your government to create positions for people who have been historically sort of oppressed and pushed out completely of the economy, causing them to not be able to afford groceries, housing, and perhaps even pushed towards addiction just because there are no opportunities.
Yeah, that's a really important question. I was part of a social innovation lab called the Edmonton Shift Lab, and we're recognized internationally for our work on anti-racism and poverty. And the connection between racism and poverty is very real for Albertans and for people around the world. And so absolutely, there has to be a government who is thinking about mobilizing anti-racist policies, anti-racist legislation, anti-racist strategies everywhere we go. Inclusivity has to be the premise, because when my Chop-On signed Treaty 6, when he smoked that pipe with the commissioner, it was about there is room for all of us in this circle. There is room for all of us to have a life here on these lands, as long as the sun shines and the grass grows and the rivers flow. Well, now the rivers aren't going to flow. So what are we going to do together?
I got goosebumps when you just said that. That's, yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yes,
Yeah.
thanks.
Okay. Last question, and then we're going to wrap up.
To your point, there is an interconnectedness when it comes to mental health, when it comes to identity, when it comes to economic disparity, and when it comes to addiction. There are a lot of organizations. For Calgary being as small as it is, there are so many organizations that deal with all of this on disparate scales. The primary reason that I'm getting from each one of them is that funding is allocated based on what grants are available, et cetera, et cetera. Under your guidance, do you think that we're going to be able to mobilize and be able to sort of like put together the organizations, as opposed to have so many different resources, so that somebody that goes in with, let's say, one of those issues that may then have a cascading effect on the others, that they can do that in a holistic fashion versus have to go elsewhere to look for other things?
That's a great question. And what I've experienced working in the not-for-profit, working in addictions, we're all competing for the same money, and it exhausts people. So literally you can have hundreds of thousands of applicants for 3 grants. That's not acceptable. We're wasting people's time and energy. And it's about relationships. It's about understanding the landscape that we are building to support our citizens. And so when we have a relationship with the organizations, the industry, then we know how to support them. But clearly, we don't have relationships because we're just putting things out for tender and reading and picking things that we think are most acceptable out of thousands of applicants. And we're wasting time and energy when we could be solving the problems.
Yeah. Well, I think based on this is the first time we've met, but I'm really impressed.
Thanks,
I'm sold. And like, hopefully I'm not the only one who, is maybe hearing you for the first time, who is maybe rethinking what their ballot might look like. Right.
Thank you. Well, and I have to admit, I am impressed with this store. I love that you are lifting that a woman's place is in council chambers and that we belong in leadership roles. And, that's really important. So thank you for what you do and for hosting all of these beautiful people and having these important conversations. This is how we change the province together.
Yeah, I totally believe that. And it's that togetherness rather than, this person's my enemy, right? We need to get beyond this. So if someone is interested in donating, volunteering, driving, helping your campaign, supporting you, getting a membership, how do they do that?
Vote for Jodi.ca, and Jodi's with an I, Jodi, voteforjodi.ca. And there's all the fancy links there, along with all the policies that I put forward. But also, I want to be really clear. My position on policy, these are ideas. What's really important about policy is that you create it with your citizens.
Yeah. Well, and that's I'll just say in contrast, the person who was here last week, Nenshi, isn't making policies, which I did ask him, is this disrespectful to all of the other candidates? And, he said it's not. I actually do think it is, because I do think you should be
take a position.
It's more, you bring, a cachet and a personality to the race. I think you also have to bring policy. But we'll see how this shapes up. I'm so interested to see how the debates go. And you strike me as someone who will ask tough questions and demand answers. And I really hope that we see that from everyone on the stage.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank
Yeah.
you for this.
So, thanks for coming.
It was great to be
Yeah,
here.
Thank you.